We'll now turn first General Sheehan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And if you have no objections, I'd like to read my statement to make sure.
That'd be fine. Is your mic on?
It is, yes, sir.
Thank you.
First, thank you for the opportunity to testify before this committee on a very complex issue. I'm here not out of any political conviction, because I was invited by this committee to share my views as part of the debate on this issue. From my previous experiences with this committee, I know this committee is charged with an awesome responsibility that is in part shared with the Commander-in-Chief, but the Constitution commits exclusively to the Congress in this body the responsibility to raise and regulate this nation's armed forces. My point of view and convictions were formed from my experience during 35 years of service as a Marine Corps infantry officer who has served in combat, led a platoon, 3 companies, an infantry battalion, and an infantry regiment. My career also includes command of units from 26 different nations. My basic belief is that everyone can and should serve this great country in some way. We also know and agree that not everybody is qualified or eligible to serve in the military for a variety of reasons, including age, health, education, and so on. The 1993 review, which resulted in the adoption of Section 654, arrived at a number of findings. The most important in my mind was there is no constitutional right to serve in the armed forces. The findings of 1993 also confirmed something that my family and I already knew and accepted, which is that military life is fundamentally different from civilian life, and that military society is characterized by its own laws, rules, customs, and traditions, including numerous restrictions on personal behavior that would not be accepted in normal civilian life. I can acknowledge that popular culture has changed in many ways. However, the nature and requirements of military life have changed very little. Military culture is deliberately developed and structured to mold individuals from all walks of life into a coherent group that willingly sacrifices self for the strength of the unit. In fact, the cohesion of a unit is predicated in part on the lack of individuality of its members. No special accommodations need to be afforded any one of them. To the degree possible, we try to make Marines interchangeable. This makes the military a unique institution within the broader American society. It asks, no, it really demands, that individuals put aside individual interests and behavior for the good of the unit. Self-sacrifice is the cornerstone of the unit cohesion that builds effective combat organizations. The don't ask, don't tell policy, however awkward and difficult, reinforces the critical maxim that first and foremost, you are a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine. Your preferences and desires are not relevant. Effectiveness in training and mission accomplishment on the battlefield are the standard to judge them by. Because the military is a human institution, it is by definition imperfect, and there are some who fail to maintain their eligibility after entry, thus rendering them ineligible for further service. The past good work of service members who are attracted to the same sex is an indication of only one thing, that they've been able to serve well prior to becoming ineligible. To my knowledge, nobody is making the argument that a man or woman being attracted to the same sex that debilitates them either intellectually or physically. The question under review is whether the behavior of a person who openly declares a sexual attraction to the same sex directly or indirectly contributes to or detracts from military cohesion. Make no mistake, this is not about consideration being given to someone who wants to serve in the military despite being attracted to the same sex. This particular argument has to do with the supposed right to declare oneself to be sexually attracted to a particular segment of the population and insist on continuing to live in the most intimate proximity with them. If this committee were able to clearly demonstrate that this change would improve military effectiveness, then the change should be implemented. But if someone were to insist on implementation because of an ulterior motive other than clear evidence, and there was an uncertainty about the effect it would have on the unit cohesion, then that is a risk I would not recommend or support in today's environment. As we sit here today, U.S. forces are deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting an armed enemy sworn to destroy our way of life. Our enemies respect and fear the United States' combat capability. Unfortunately, our enemies, especially the extremists, do not care how enlightened or progressive our culture may be. The only thing that matters is the effectiveness on the battlefield. For over 200 years, the Marine Corps and other elite combat formations like Special Forces, Airborne and Ranger units have developed training and performance-based systems that breed success in the battlefield. Effective units need to act as a coherent unit. As the law says, military life is fundamentally different from a civilian life. This is a difficult reality to accept for individuals who have never served or had such exposure to our armed forces. It goes well beyond just wearing a uniform to work on a daily basis. More than once during my military career, the unacceptable behavior of one selfish Marine has created a single point of failure for his unit and endangered lives. In every instance, unit polarization occurred because of this selfish behavior. I also know that some will argue that the circumstances of warfare are different. I would argue that in many ways they're very similar. Selfish behavior in Vietnam, Kafji, Fallujah can affect entire units and detract from the success of combat missions. To state the obvious, warfare is difficult, ugly business. Congress should not impose more uncertainty on a battlefield that is already complex enough. Each member of this committee must, in his or her mind, feel absolutely certain that the change of the current law will improve this nation's combat effectiveness and minimize the risks our young men and women face in today's battlefield. The change must also reduce the current environment of a hostile workplace that exists and is increasing today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.